Islam, Islam. We back, baby. Second book session. We're still reading from the developmental psychology of the black child. Got my tea with me today. Show you what the tea says. This is a elderberry and lemon balm by the Yogi brand. We can always start again. Then I have what I get from Trader Joe's, a peppermint tea as well. Let me let that steep some more. Of course, I got the sea moss in there, and the sea moss I'll make. Put lion's mane in there, burdock root, bladderwrack, and then manuka honey. And also have capsules. They also have soursop, sea moss, turmeric, moringa, a few other. Then I have my pre and probiotic, digestive enzymes. Now those aren't, none of this stuff is necessity, only enhancements, right? Allah created us in this image, so obviously we were made perfect. Oh, all right. So let's get to it. Let that tea steep a little bit, and we'll jump right into chapter 2. So chapter 1 was about the prenatal period, talking about the ramifications of what will happen if the mother doesn't treat herself um, well emotionally, if her physical health is not up to par, obviously spiritual, mental, and financial as well. All those will have to be up to par for that prenatal period to have the best possible childbirth. All right, so let's get into it. This will be about ages, I believe it's age 2, first 2 years, yeah. Black child the first 2 years. All right. In overview, the child develops and changes rapidly during the first 2 years. Its first task immediately after being delivered is to learn to survive and adjust to a new and alien environment. Assuming that it is born healthy and receives peri and postnatal care, this task should be accomplished without much difficulty. In order to successfully cope with the new environment, the newborn must learn to trust it. And this is, like I was mentioning yesterday, it's imperative if you're going to bring a child in this world. Try to take the best measures that you can before doing so, because a lot of times you have strangers who touch the child before the actual mother does. And then, of course, the instant separation anxiety occurs when you have the umbilical cord is cut. Of course, so it's supposed to fall off. So that causes the disconnection from the mother instantly, the mother and the child. Well, the placenta is taken. And then other things that happen, like for young boys, getting circumcised. These are things that cause that anxiety. And then on top of that, you have daycare that starts at 6 weeks. You have a mother who carries a child in the womb for 9 months, and then just 6 weeks later, it's okay to give that child to strangers. So nothing positive can really come from that, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, in those earlier stages. But again, You can always, do your best to help children cope with those situations. However, we want to strive for the best of possibilities that we can achieve. So that's in order to successfully cope in a new environment, the newborn must learn to trust it. And those are ways that helps the newborn learn to trust the environment. This can be accomplished if the environment, which includes his caretakers, of course, responds to his needs in a consistent, satisfying way, and if the environment is safe and relatively stable. In this case, is the children learns to trust the environment and to have confidence in his ability to influence to meet his needs. This trust lays the basis for healthy, pro-social personality development. Otherwise, mistrust of the environment leads to a lack of confidence in itself to influence that environment, which then lays the basis for unhealthy antisocial personality development. Trust is developed through the baby's feeding, physically comforting, auric tactile stimulative relations with his mother or other caretakers. And that's why they say it takes a child to raise a village. Now it's different when you have your own community and those are the caretakers of your family. But again, as nurses try to do their best to have good intentions, there's still a form of disconnect, in my opinion at least, because those aren't exactly family members. If the child is fully affirmed by having his emotional and physical needs fulfilled, he begins to develop into a confident, secure being, becomes fully prepared to cope with the next developmental task. The next task, which has existed simultaneously with the first, but which becomes increasingly more prominent as the child approaches his second year, involves the integration of the many individual reflexes he was born with into larger, more complexly coordinated, voluntarily controlled movement and behavior. The consequence of such integrative efforts on the child's part is that he becomes automative, i.e., self motivating, instead of being carried around by his caretakers. He becomes increasingly autonomous as in the beginning of the second year he learns to stand on his own 2 feet, mentally and physically. Yeah, actually, my son was about 9 months. Yeah, that 9 to 10 month period when he started. Yeah, I believe that was it. Yeah, yeah, somewhere in that range, um, that 9 to 10 month range when he started to be able to stand. So definitely way before two. Actually, he started, being mastering his potty training around then. Too. Um, he constantly tests his swiftly developing physical, mental, and linguistic prowess on the environment. The child tests himself to the limits of the capacities and also tests the limits of the environment and those who are part of it. He does this basically of his own free will. Consequently, his interaction with the environment may enhance or negate his autonomous or independent strivings depending on the nature of his reaction to these survivors. The overprotective mother may often negate her child's autonomous strivings by not allowing it to safely explore and learn of its environment and to test, develop, and perfect its abilities to cope with the various demands made by the environment. The underprotected mother may stun her child's independent strivings by allowing him to experience too many hazardous and unsafe consequences of his environmental probings, thus creating the child a fear of the environment and withdrawal from his exploration, also leading to retardation in his testing, development, and perfecting of coping abilities. The underprotected child, like the overprotected child, may develop an insecure personality which fears autonomous, independent actions on his part may lead to trouble, anxiety, and shame. These children do not learn the clear limitations of their environment or behavior. Clearly appropriate caretaker behavior during this period involves striking a golden mean of prior caretaker behavior during this period involves striking a golden mean between these two extremes, allowing the child to safely express his autonomous strivings, perhaps encouraging them, but at the same time establishing clear and rational limits on these strivings, especially when they may result in dangerous consequences. The mother who encourages and affirms the child's reasonable autonomous actions lays the groundwork for future motivations to achieve and make independent and original decisions. Not all of the child's attention is focused on mobility, integration, coordination, manipulation, and exploitation during this period. He is also developing attentive, cognitive, and linguistic abilities and a knowledge of self. The mother's role in the development of these abilities is an important one. Her ability to supply the optimal psychological support and environmental stimulus is a very important contribution to the baby's physical and mental development. One of the most important things to take place in the life of the 2-year-old is the beginning development of communicative linguistic abilities. These are obviously some of the most important abilities. They are highly influenced by the environment, the economic, social, education level of the family, and culture, as well as the emotional and intellectual quality of the home and the general mass of experience the child is exposed to. We shall enter into a detailed discussion of this highly important and controversial topic later. Infant malnutrition. All right, I think my tea is ready. Oh, Up to its preschool years, the child may frequently get ill, necessitating careful physical care. Respiratory infection causes the most frequent type of physical illness experienced by the children in this society. Gastrointestinal upsets are also very frequent, as during the prenatal period, the greatest threat to the poor black mother's child is malnutrition, especially protein malnutrition. The second phase of brain growth occurs during the first 2 years of child development. Consequently, malnutrition during this period may cause mental retardation or in a number of ways impair mental and physical development. In underdeveloped countries, protein malnutrition may lead to death. The tremendous brain development taking place during this early period is demonstrated by the fact that the 2-year-old needs about 70% more calories and 3 times as much protein as an adult. Now, that is very intriguing. 3 times as much protein as an adult. Let's say an average adult, what, 180 pounds? In 0.5 to 1 gram of protein per pound. Ooh. I don't know. I don't know if a child, I don't know if a 2-year-old would be getting at least, even if you say an adult is 160, I guess. Well, adult male probably be, I mean, I'm just saying 180 on the lower end. That's an ectomorph. A mesomorph, we talking at least 200. So a child getting in 100 to 200 grams of protein at two, I don't think that's necessary. Of course, depending on the source of the protein, I just don't. The average 2-year-old, maybe 30, 40 pounds, 50 at the most. Yeah, that is intriguing to hear. And the severe forms of malnutrition may produce two crippling diseases: marasmus and kwashiorkor. The wasting away of the body tissues is symptomatic of marasmus. So marasmus is the wasting of the body tissues. Also symptomatic of the malady or growth under weight, muscular atrophy, washing away of cutaneous fat. Kwashior- Kwashiorkor causes swelling of the face, legs, and abdomen due to the retention of water in the body tissues. Also, body growth is retarded. The child suffers from a general pervasive apathy. This syndrome most frequently occurs in 1 to 4 years old who are protein malnourished. Both liver and brain damage may occur as a result from this cause. All over the world, including the United States of America, poor children are suffering from insufficient protein, often along with insufficient calories. The physical and mental growth and health are being depressed now and for the future. This is really, yeah, I think I'm going to have to do a study or do some research on this. Maybe take a poll. Maybe this summer, I guess, be the best time to do it, or maybe the spring. Just go to different parks and ask mothers of 2 years old, 2 years, how many calories and how many grams of protein is a 2 year old consuming? Because it's 3 times the amount as an adult. Ugh. Now I can see insufficient protein because microwavable society. So, and then of course the capitalist society. Not a lot of time to focus on, or for some, not a lot of time to focus on calorie count and macros basically that the child is getting. So they might, quick meals and things like that. However, that's kind of hard to fathom for me. 3 times the amount of protein as an adult. Malnourished children are more likely to succumb to all sorts of infections and suffer more of their form. Infections infections aggravate the state of malnutrition by suppressing the appetite and making excessive demands on nitrogen and other essential nutrients. The malnourished child's condition is worsened by infection and the body lowers its resistance to new infections. Malnutrition reduces the body's ability to manufacture antibodies. Growth is retarded since the body's store of nutrients is insufficient. Poor hygiene is often a result of poverty. This factor, along with poor diet, leads to the spread of disease. Poor quality, unsanitary food introduces disease organisms causing infection, diarrhea, and parasite infestations. Wide and social contact introduces viral diseases such as measles and other childhood diseases. Pneumonia is a frequent complication of measles. In this country, illiteracy and ignorance of basic hygiene methods and nutrition, combined with inadequacy of governmental food programs and medical care, must often have the most important adverse influence on the baby's health and growth. So he has this chart here. So we have low income, insufficient food. Let's go to the basis. So at the basis, ignorance or low intelligence. From low income and insufficient food, poor or choice of food. Then it goes to crowding, dirt, disease, organism. malnutrition, slow growth, apathy, low intelligence, stress, and disease. So the interrelations of causes and results of malnutrition disease. Physiological development and race. There are a number of distinct differences in the rate and distribution of physiological development between ethnic groups, particularly between blacks and whites. For instance, the time in which the teeth first erupt in infancy differ markedly between the two ethnic groups. Generally, non-whites tend to erupt earlier than do whites. Some have interpreted this to mean the least favored groups seem to have the most advanced eruption at time. Thus, since blacks erupt earlier than whites, the assumption is that since blacks are least favored, then the eruption must be due to generally low socioeconomic status of blacks and a concomitant poor diet. However, a 10-state survey conducted by the American Academy of Pediatrics indicated that when corrected for socioeconomic status, the permanent teeth of black children are established significantly in advance of white children, reach maturity earlier, and tend to be larger. One of the general conclusions drawn by the Academy of the interest here, both on absolute basis and when corrected for income level, black boys and girls in comparison to white and Spanish American children tended to have skeletal advancement, ossification, dental advancement, age at permanent teeth eruption, and earlier maturation, and some tendency toward greater body size, notwithstanding lesser body fat through adolescence. Black boys and girls evidence a greater mass both on a group basis and on an income corrected basis. Therefore, genetic factors outweigh economic factors and explain the differences in skeletal and dental development. These findings suggest a need for a different standard for blacks and white children when assessing nutritional status during growth. The genetic difference in physiological development alluded to in the above study may not be of much importance except when we consider that many black mothers use white nutritional standards, and we recognize the psychosocial advancement of black children during early childhood and the relationship of these advanced states to learning readiness. The use of white-based nutritional standards may not actually be the best interest of the developing black child. Now, I can agree with that. Um, yes, we're all, you know, in the human experience. Yet we incarnate into different shells or different bodies, you know, for a reason. And melanin dominant, obviously, I mean, you just look at the Punnett Square, obviously wouldn't need to eat the food of the recessive. So, I mean, that's pretty obvious. Psychomotor development and race. An impressive number of studies of variances between black and white child psychomotor development have shown consistently that up to at least first 2 years, black children are significantly more advanced than our white children. Though this variance is most marked by black children definitively established motor superiority, the base measures of are psychomotor measurements, i.e. childhood motor behavior involving mental and intellectual components. Therefore, when we speak of motor development in this section, we are in no way implying that we are speaking of purely motor behavior, that this behavior is without intellectual input or of no importance in intellectual growth. It has been noted that whenever motor differences between white and black American infants have been noted in the research literature, the black babies have been advanced in comparison with whites. We may note here that this is also the case with black children of other nationalities, particularly of African origin. In a comparative study of the psychomotor development of African and European children, Gerber concluded that the results of tests showed in an all-around advance of development over European standards that which was greater the younger child. So the younger child was greater. A look at some comparisons listed by, I guess it's Geber. I'm wondering if there's a typo there, but we'll just say Geber then. In this study, we may give a better idea of the differences between these groups. So comparison of African European psychomotor development. One, 9 years old, 9 hours old, being drawn up into a sitting position, able to prevent the head from falling back. Sheesh. European, 6 weeks. 9 hours old. 2 days old with head held firmly and looking at face of the examiner. European, 8 weeks. 7 weeks old, supporting herself in a sitting position and watching her reflection in the mirror. European, 20 weeks. 5 months old, holding herself upright. European, 9 months. Taking the round block out of its hole in the form board. European, 11 months. 5 months old, standing against the mirror. European, 9 months. 7 months old, walking to the gesso box to look inside. European, 15 months. 11 months old, climbing the steps alone. European, 15 months. And I noticed these differences as well when taking both my children to the park and seeing, how they would be eager to climb up the slides by themselves earlier on. So yeah, this is, I'm not sure if it's to this extreme. I don't think I didn't start measuring it as early as these figures are showing. However, I've still noticed it. Not surprised by it. I mean, just come on, man. Look at who we are. So, in reviewing Geber's studies, Papilia and Olds, 16, came to the conclusion that the African babies actually seem to have been born at a more advanced stage of development, since many of the activities that's less than a week can correspond to those performed by European children aged 4 to 8 weeks. Tronick, Kosolowski, and Brazelton compared the neonatal behavior of urban Zambian and American infants, despite the fact that on the first day, the Zambian children reacted less than the American children. Within 5 days, they had caught up, and in 10 days had surpassed their counterparts, become more attentive and responsive. We the gods. We the gods. Etta Walters tested babies on the Giselle developmental schedules within 3 days of their 12-week to 24-week and 36-week birthday. These children were divided according to black, white, ethnic origins, and according to low, middle, and high socioeconomic status. She found that black children were moderately superior up to age 12 weeks, at which the point the differences were not significant, except that at 36 weeks, the black high socioeconomic group was superior. Finally, in an extensive study of 1,409 babies between the ages of 1 month and 15 months, and located in 12 urban areas representative of various areas of the United States, Bailey found a general trend toward superiority in the Negroes. The average of the black children were higher at every age except 15 months. Bailey's 1,409 infants included 55% white, 42% black, and 2.3% other. The black infants were superior on all 60 test items of the Bailey scales. Though cultural, prenatal, postnatal, environmental factors, evolutionary, and nutritional, one writer implied that the protein deficiency may be responsible for the black advancement in motor development. Hold on. Hold on. So protein deficiency was responsible for the advancement in motor development. Even though it's only an implication, I would say maybe we don't need as much protein as we think we do. So going back to that needing 3 times the amount of as an adult protein might not be right and exact. Explanations have been invoked to explain the differences found by the above mentioned studies. Most of the writers on this matter incline toward a genetic explanation. Thus, it would appear that the psychomotor porosity of black children is genetically determined. It is indeed very interesting that despite the many prenatal insults that the black child has to suffer, as noted in the first chapter, he still is psychomotorically more advanced than his more prenatally fortunate white counterpart. We shall see that the psychomotor advancement of the black child is paralleled by similar advancement in IQ, or more accurately, DQ, which is developmental quotient. Intelligence and race. Many of the studies mentioned above also tested the mental capacity of black and white children. The vast majority of them use one of the two most popular infant developmental scales, Bailey scales of infant development, or the Giselle developmental test. The Bailey scales consist of two major components, a mental and motor scale. The scales together yield an IQ score. These scales were factor analyzed in one study to test the function of eye hand manipulation, object relation, imitation comprehension, vocalization, social contact, and active vocabulary. Thus, the Bailey scales were definitely designed to measure more than motor development. These scales measure development from birth to 15 months. The Giselle schedules are principally standardized observations used to measure four major areas of development, covering the ages of 4 to 6 weeks. 4 weeks to 6 years. My apologies. The four areas covered by this test include motor behavior, adaptive behavior, language behavior, and personal social behavior. The schedules yield a DQ, which is obtained by dividing the child's overall score, termed the mental age, by the child's chronological age and multiplying it by 100. A final figure of 100 indicates that the child has scored equal to his or her age level. Above 100 indicates that the child has scored better on some items than 50% of children of the same age level. Below 100 indicates the obverse. Utilizing the Giselle scale, Etta Walters in this study mentioned above concluded that the only statistically significant differences between two groups was in favor of the Negro infant in motor development at 12 weeks. However, the mean scores for the Negro group were higher than the white mean scores for the Negro group were higher than the white mean scores for all the test areas of development at 12 weeks. After that, the means were comparable. Geber in her 1958 study quoted above also used the Giselle scales and concluded porosity was not only in motor development, it was found in intellectual development also. It is not always realized that intellectual development is displayed very clearly in the use of the Giselle material. To take an elementary example, the child who merely looks at the cubes and then picks them up is demonstrating a series of intellectual processes. And for the building of a tower with the cubes, more complex processes are needed in addition to the greater manual dexterity, like I was mentioning yesterday. Invest into the child, make sure they putting them blocks together, um, and doing those different activities to get things going. Getting those synapses is firing. Although most of the African children have never seen anything resembling the test material, they used it in the same way as European children succeeded in the test earlier than those children. Their interest was lively, and their personal and social relations are excellent. They made very good contact with the tester, turning and talking and smiling and trying to in every way to communicate. A study by Knobloch and Pasamanik, also using the Giselle scales, it was found that Black American infants had superior motor scores, and similar adaptive language and personal social scores as compared with white through age 2 years. Bailey's previously quoted study indicated that it is clear that there are no differences in the mean scores of these three samples of babies, black, white, Puerto Rican, at any period of development in the first 15 months. It is clear that for kinds of developmental behavior we were able to designate as mental during the first 15 months, there are no differences between the Negroes, the whites, and the small subsample Puerto Ricans we have tested. Bailey goes on to conclude that it would appear that the behaviors which are developing during the first 15 months of life, whether they are motor skills or the early perceptual and adaptive forms of mental abilities, are for the most part unrelated to sex, race, birth order, geographical location, or parental ability. The one possible difference is in the motor development, in which the Negro babies tend to be more advanced than the whites during the first 12 months. A genetic factor may be operating. Before we deal with implications of these studies, a quotation from Jensen is of interest. It has also been noted that brainwave patterns in African newborn infants show greater maturity than is usually found in the European newborn child. This finding especially merits further study since there is evidence that brain waves have some relationship to IQ. And since at least one aspect of brain waves, the visually evoked potential, has a very significant genetic component showing a heritability about uh, 0.80 uncorrected for attenuation. So let us summarize our data thus far mentioned. All the studies show that the black child to be significantly advanced over the white child in motor development up to at least 2 years when the trends tend to disappear. Mm. Now, what I would be intrigued in knowing is if these 2-year-old children that they're testing has been to daycare or not. Well, I think whenever I think they're using Head Start, children in Head Start, I believe. I think it mentioned that early on. The consensus of the researchers in the area is that these differences are genetic. The scales established that the black child was intellectually above or equal to, but not less than, his white counterpart. Strangely enough, a genetic explanation for this advantage or equality was not invoked by the researchers. Generally, it would appear that the differences between black and white infants disappear between the ages of 1.5 to 2 years, and the equality of their mental and motor function begins to reverse in favor of the white child at around age 3. We think that this is no coincidence that black intellectual function as compared to that of whites, as measured by standard IQ tests, begin to fall during this period, beginning with the acquisition of language, starting somewhere around 12 to 18 months, and the formation of stabilized personality structure from 3 to 5 years. For the first 2 to 3 years at least, it appears that the black child approaches the Greek ideal of a sound mind and sound body. However, the ravages of racial prejudice and poverty destroys and distorts much of this wonderful potential. So sad. Reliability of infant intelligence tests. Due to the extremely low predictive correlation between the intelligence scores of early infancy and later childhood and adulthood, some psychologists tend to regard the infant intelligence tests as unreliable or to assume that they are not measuring intelligence. We think it would be expecting too much for tests which essentially measure proverbial subjects, relatively uncultured subjects whose personality and cognitive styles are still relatively unformed, to correlate well with tests given as close as a few months later, let alone years later when culture, environment, and traumas have added or subtracted so much to or from the whole. Yeah, that's definitely the caveat. Not to have like I mean, everyone has their adversities, but I mean, Stevie Wonder could see that. So-called black people obviously have a little bit more obstacles in front of them. Like a so-called black child can't really be a black child. Most of the time, he starts off being the head of the household early on. So it's like, yeah, that's why. Interpreting data collected by Bailey Ginsberg stated that infants' test scores during the first year of life are nearly useless for predicting scores at later ages. Infant scores during the second year of life, months 13, 14, 15, are moderately correlated with scores during the third year of life, months 27, 30, and 36, but poorly correlated with scores after that point. Scores during the period from about the third year of life to 5, 6, and 7 are fairly stable, showing a correlation of 0.70. After the age of about 5, the scores are highly stable. For example, the correlation between the average scores at age 5, 6, and 7 and the corresponding score at year 17 and 18 is 0.86. It's important to note that the correlation between IQ scores and later ones begins to become increasingly reliable from the period of rapid language acquisition when the basic foundation of personality are being laid, when a child's culture is beginning to have the most marked influence on his mental functioning, and when the child is becoming consciously aware of his ethnic category. In light of this, it may be the infant intelligence scales, which are relatively unaffected by sex, birth order, parental educational level, and geographical residence, may be more reliable than the more culturally biased IQ tests of late childhood and adulthood. Whatever the case, whatever the infant scales are measuring, the black child is on or above par with his white counterpart, even in their unreliability for predicting later IQ scores. The infant scales reliably show black children to be of at least equal potential as white children. In terms of influence of parental educational level, geographical residence, cultural background, etc., a statement by Papalia and Ode is relevant here. Although socioeconomic status does not appear to be related to infant mental or motor development, it is a good predictor of the direction of DQ change from infancy to preschool age. The test scores of children in middle class and superior working class home increases after infancy. Children from culturally deprived working class homes increases after infancy. Children from culturally deprived working class homes show a decline as the child grows. Then the home environment assumes more and more importance. This can be seen in the rising level of racial differences in DQs as children grow older, even when there are considerable disparities in the amount of education of the children's mother. The children's DQ do not reflect this. By 3 years of age, though, the picture is very different. White children score better, even when the mothers of both white and black babies have similar amounts of education. I might have to reach out to see where I can reach out to join this study, put my children to the test. All right. In racist American society, the black middle and upper classes are also deprived. Racism, with its tendency to breed chronic anxiety, lack of self confidence, self knowledge, and self love, its tendency to restrict black children of all economic levels from optimally potentiating environments with its tendency to produce neurotic schizoid adaptive mechanisms in black takes a measurable toll from black personal social cognitive functioning. That's a wild. He got things spitting. Wild sentences. He's just letting it flow. In a society where a smart nigger is seen as a threat and an athletically adept one is an asset, cognitive brilliance among blacks is seen as threatening and may even be punished in various ways, and athletic brilliance is highly rewarded. It is no accident that the black intellectual function tends to decline with age, and black physical function does not tend in the same direction or may actually become more advanced. Third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, I was winning spelling bees on their ass. Yeah, now you can't mess with us. The Moors. Got the sixth grade. Start seeing them eighth graders. I mean, voluptuous eighth graders. Yeah, it was. Academics was no longer really something to strive for. Girls, 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 girls all over the world. That's what it became about. All good, chasing the girls, doing enough to stay in school, and just mesmerized with the girls as they get out older. When you start prematurely involving yourself in intercourse, the frequency just turns up even more. Then get into sports. Scoring touchdowns. People know your name. Oh man, yeah, it just got wild. So I can definitely see that. Yeah, and it's not. So we just got to bring back. We got to bring as much as someone would cheer for someone, dunking a ball or scoring a touchdown, we got to cheer for them, you know, to be, chess masters or billionaires, millionaires outside of athletics, true ownership. That has to be cool. And that's the difference between athletes of like, the 60s and 70s period. Because I mean they were athletes, but they spoke out about, certain issues that was going on and weren't afraid to speak out about it. But now everything's, so compromising. You lose the opportunities if you give your actual opinion. So you gotta actually basically play dumb like you don't know anything, just to, keep the funds flowing. Yeah, but we gotta, and it's happening. We have like um the Jalen Browns, you know, like of the NBA. As far as athletes, and it's certain, yeah, it's certain entertainers, and Ye, at one point he's doing as much as he could, but I mean he's just sometimes just getting too deep. Um, but yeah, but again, we can't be looking at celebrities, or in the form of athletes, musicians, whatever it may be. We can't really look at them as leaders. You just got to acknowledge them for what they do. That's their profession. So don't look to them for to speak out politically and things like that. It's not what they do. We just happen to have done that in the past, and now we kind of like, oh, where's that? So now that's kind of like those individuals taking upon themselves to show that, the Muhammad Ali's, even the Jim Browns at one point, the Archie Moores, I believe Ken Norton. Yeah, so it is what it is. Okay, here we go. Where we are. There's evidence that it may not be physical home institutional deprivation that are so damaged to cognitive and other emergent skills as psychological, cognitive, motivational, functional deprivations. It's well established that motivation and intellectual functioning are inextricably bound together. Motivational systems such as the one alluded in the previous paragraph are without a doubt dysfunctional for Black cognitive development in the full sense of the word. In spite of the quite extensive number of prenatal dangers the Black child must face as compared with the white child, he generally begins life a step ahead, or at least on equal footing with his white counterpart in all of his physical, mental, congenital possibilities. We have seen that the Black child is in no way born inferior to the white child. Apparently, the cognitive cultural lag, which the Black child begins to manifest in his second and third years, are the result of psychosocial factors, cognitive, motivational, functional deprivation that he is subject to by belonging to the outgroup in a racist society. Granted that poor pre, peri, and postnatal environments take their negative toll on the Black potential, it is prevailing poor psychosocial conditions under which the Black child is reared that are preeminently responsible for whatever cognitive behavioral problems he may display. Though the dominant white society, with its racist policies and beliefs, laid the basis for such poor psychosocial conditions, it is the Black parents who are ultimately responsible for not training their child to successfully cope with such circumstances. That's what I'm saying. That's what I was saying. Yeah, it's can't change the world unless you can change yourself. Probably best to play the hand you were dealt, but play that hand to the best of your ability. Right. So that don't mean just put the cards down. No, it's strategic. before you put those cards down. During the first 2 to 3 years, it is Black parents who represent the negative psychosocial world to the children and consciously or unconsciously socialize the children in terms of that world. We're all aware of the nature of the white created negative psychosocial world, which engulfs Black people. What we wish to know is what is in the nature of the psychosocial world of Black parents, which causes them to socialize such a large number of their children to become dysfunctional in both Black and white society. In an effort to answer part of this broad question, we will briefly discuss what we think are the three major variables which, operating through Black parents, adversely influence the development of the Black child during his early years. The schizoid nature of Black existence, the chronically frustrated nature of Black life, and the restricted nature of the Black world. The schizoid nature of Black existence. Black people in America do not belong to any one functional, coherent, cohesive culture. Well, because we're not Black, like I said, it'd be better to, because we're the real Americans. However, descendants of Americans, descendants of Moroccans born in America, Moorish Americans. Yet that's not even taken in consideration on the grand scheme of things. But that's the only solution. Culture is the only solution. No matter how much we preach about these things till we blue in the face, talk about the problems. Oh, they're not doing this. They're not doing that. They're not doing that. They're not doing that. Culture, nationality, which ties you back to land, culture, and customs. So what's that? We say Black people, Koreans, Black people, Nigerians, Black people, Chinese, right? You see the disconnect. What are we missing, man? How they setting up these stores? What that? Black people, Indians, or Hindustanis. Black people, Pakistanis, Arabs, or Arabians, right? You have a collective of people identifying themselves as a collective. Black people, Italians, right? They're identifying themselves in a way that answers up to the constitutional form of government. Yet we're still, and this is politically now, acknowledge ourselves as a misnomer. Even if you want to use the misnomer, then the only way we could make it happen is if we know that we're talking arcane, occult, or esoteric. Even if not that, the only way we can make it happen is there was unity. So that's the unfortunate side of it. So we can't keep saying Black people don't have any culture. Well, we have culture. Yeah. What's become the culture of the so-called Black people is anti-improvement or anti-liberation, anti-freedom. So they belong to neither the white culture, which is again, there's no white culture either, or to one they can call their own. Culturally speaking, blacks exist between the devil of the dominant white world to which he is not permitted to fully belong, and the deep blue sea of the currently dysfunctional black world to which he is not also not permitted to belong. He's victimized by both worlds and has thus far found no positive way out of this crushing dilemma. The black man today is only part black. The other part of him, he is white. These two parts, which more often than not pull against each other, which contradict each other, and which are out of sync with each other, make up virtually the whole of the black body and mind. Thus, the black man is a split personality, a schizoid personality which tries to operate with two sets of mutually incompatible needs, drives, impulses, values, culture, traditions, ways of thinking, etc., simultaneously. W.B. Du Bois poignantly describes this black condition when he states that the Negro is a sort of a seventh born with a veil and gifted with second sight in this American world, a world which yields him no true self consciousness, but only lets him see himself through the eyes of others, and measures one's soul by the tape of the world that looks on in amused contempt and pity. One never feels his two-ness an American, a Negro of two souls, two thoughts, two unreconciled strivings, two warring ideals in one black body whose dog strength alone keeps it from being torn asunder. The history of the American Negro is the history of the strife of his longing to attain self conscious manhood, to merge his double self into a better and truer self. In this merging, he wishes neither of the older selves to be lost. He would not Africanize America, for America has too much to teach the world in Africa. He would not bleach his Negro soul in the flood of white Americanism, for he knows the Negro blood has a message for the world. He simply wished to make it possible for a man to be both a Negro and an American without being cursed and spit upon by his fellows, without having the door of opportunity closely, roughly in his face. Now imagine we in Jim Crow. European come up to you, hey nigger, go back to Africa, and you just say, hey cracker, you go back to Europe. Then he'll say, no, I'm American. And then you say, nah, you're not American. You're goddamn European. The American is, look at the 1828 Webster's Dictionary for American. You don't fit the description. The copper color race is found here by the Europeans. All right. Now implies the European is descendants. You don't look copper colored to me, cracker. So you take your ass back to Europe. Oh, imagine the difference in dialogue you would have now just by being able to say that. Right? We're technically the only Americans, North Americans, because we have our, you know, yeah, North America's a continent, said in North, South, Central America, and the adjoining islands, of course. Us, uh, and the Mexicans, Peruvians, and things, and the Brazilians. That's why the prophet said we're all Muslims, right? But imagine like now that conversation, it picks up from all of us, and I'm acting like I'm. This is just a regular so-called black man, not in a turban, nothing like that. Just onto the hip to the game, hip to the history, to let them know that they're not Americans. They from Europe, and we was born here. We always been here. So there's no such thing as going back to Africa. But they can take their ass back to Europe. Like I was in Publix one time with my feds on, European asked me about, what it's about. Dropped the science to him, and he was kind of like, shocked and things like that. He's like, yeah, I mean, I'm thinking like, yeah, yeah, it's time. We waking up. But that's literally the difference maker right there. If those type of situations occur, because I mean, it's not false, and that's why it's like, yeah, knowledge can be power. Because as a matter of that in that scenario, that so-called black man, or I was saying the more knew that, but he decided not to speak on that. Then it doesn't really matter because yeah, knowledge can be power, but it becomes power once it's applied. So civil rights movement, even Dr. Martin Luther King even said the Negro had been exiled in his own homeland. So what are we talking about? What are we talking about? So why are we marching for civil rights if we're in our own homeland? Like, come on. Like the fight need to be for human rights and the recognition of a nationality. We're already home. We are the American. That's wild. All right, but where are we? Let's see here. I believe we are. Listen, quoting Du Bois. Yeah, okay. Finish that. Regardless of income, social, or educational status, every black individual, group, or family is haunted by this double consciousness to which Du Bois refers. It's an essential fact. Is an essential fact of black existence, and its influence, for better or worse, is pervasive in all areas of black behavior. And this is kind of fascinating that Du Bois even taking this stance when he had a problem with Marcus Garvey. So it's like, come on, man. Okay. Um, though effectively present at all class levels of the black community, as we have just implied, double consciousness and its effects are not experienced psychologically with the same intensity reacted to with the same defense mechanistic priorities by the various class levels, generally because of its similar values, educational background, income, occupational status, and its desire to be fully accepted by the white middle class, which emulates and by which it evaluates itself. The black middle class experiences double consciousness the most acutely when compared to the black working and lower classes. The black middle class is therefore the most schizoid of the classes. Please note that the term schizoid is used here in the social psychological sense, not the psychopathological sense, even though it can and does have psychopathological consequences. A segment of the black middle class which fits what Fraser calls the black bourgeoisie is the most schizoid of all. The hallmark of schizoid living is ambivalence, an ambivalence which enters into virtually every activity of the schizoid's life. His relation to himself and to others is marked by the same ambivalence. Thus, the schizoid black chronically maintains a fluctuating love-hate relation to himself, his people, other peoples, particularly whites. His life is characterized by a constant vacillation between the two conflicting worlds of different ethnic histories, lifestyles, values, etc. He has no fixed reference point in which he can use with confidence to orient his life, values, goals, attitudes, and behavior to stabilize his relations to himself as well as others. Consequently, his relations with himself and others are confused, liable, and ambivalent, even though these may be smoothed over by superficial order and harmony. The middle class, black or white, is particularly adept at maintaining appearances. From the above description, one can logically conclude that the schizoid black parent's relationship to his or her child will make one marked essentially by ambivalence. This means that the child will be loved on one level and hated on another. The child may be loved because of desire for personal and social fulfillment, because it represents the hopes of its parents, and hated at the same time because it bears the mark of oppression. Its blackness, since blackness is hated by whites, is a source of black self hatred. If one hates oneself because one is black, then one hates others who bear the same hated color as the self. Other blacks, including one's black children. No. Just hate to just don't even like the term. I just yeah. All that has to be wiped out. The schizoid black parents relationship may also be marked by feelings of guilt stemming from parents' awareness of the degradation his child will suffer as a member of black race and racist American society, and his or her having been responsible for bringing the child into such a society and exposing him to such degradation. Thus, the schizoid black parent loves and rejects the fears of his or her black child at once and same time. Feeling of guilt, the schizoid black parent will at times generate compensatory overprotectiveness, overindulgence, permissiveness. Compensatory permissiveness toward the child, and at the same time or other times, along with the feeling of rejection referred to above, generate negative overreactions, negligence, indifference, overstrickenness toward the child. Because of this schizoid nature, the parents can offer little or no consistent discipline, direction, unneurotic love, etc. to the child. They cannot establish consistent limits which the child can readily and easily comprehend by which he can guide his current and future behavior. Thus, the child, in an effort to adapt to behavior of the schizoid parents, begins to develop confused, powerless, contradictory, emotionally crippled, incompetent, ambivalent, and schizoid personality like that of his parents. Man. In addition, he will begin to develop a poor self-image, a lack of self-confidence, self-love, and self-knowledge. These personality factors are early reveal themselves by their negative influence in the major areas of cognitive, personal, and social functioning. A study by Langner et al. Can serve as possible example of how pervasive the negative effects of double consciousness, which, as we previously said, affects all blacks, are. The study determined the prevalence of emotionally disturbed children in high and low income Spanish, black, and white families in the Midtown area of Manhattan, New York City. One of the surprising findings of the study was that in terms of psychological impairment, there was no substantial differences between black low income children and black high income children. This goes against the general trend in these types of studies where the low income group usually has significantly higher rate of psychological impairment. Langer et al. Interpreted this finding to imply that as Negroes attain higher incomes, various environmental forces such as prejudice and job discrimination, which in turn may have effects on family organization relationships, prevent their children from obtaining a commensurate reduction in impairment. Langner and his co-workers also implied that due to the fact that a very high percentage, 81 to 49%, of the high-income black families' incomes were generated by both husband and wife working, maternal care have deteriorated, causing emotion impaired in the children, income notwithstanding. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's the trap, the two income trap. I mean, yeah, you might be able to buy more, but man, worry about the buying, the purchasing power once a child is like 18. All like, what does a child really need? What besides the food, clothing, shelter, and toys and things that's going to help them develop, though, not just for just mindless play. I mean, I guess if you get them involved in sports and things like that, they don't need equipment and the likes. But as far as like truly need for their development, love is going to be the most important factor. Both parents working, and that's why I say like just just don't have children. Like if you if you can't come to that agreement of how it's going to go, like obviously as us as men, we're more physically stronger. We have more stamina most of the time, so we should be the one just working, and the mother should be at the home. The mother should be at home with the children, nurturing and installing them with principles that they can use and be productive in society. But it's like it's yeah, the Felicia Rashads of the world, like those, that old school, that old school installment. Um, and of course, I'm just from the outside looking in at her, but she seemed like she would be intrigued about just installing those principles in a child, just by some of the things she said. But yeah, you gotta want it, like you gotta truly want it. We believe that the schizoid nature of black existence in America, as we described it above, which we also indicated is felt more acutely by the higher income blacks, was a major factor responsible for Langner's findings. Besides a number of other negative effects listed as resulting from the schizoid nature of black existence, one of the major effects of this kind of existence was the inability of black parents to offer non-contradictory, consistent discipline, guidance, etc. to the children. We believe this additional interpretive factor is to a large degree validated by Langner's further finding that in the area of disciplining their children, high-income black parents show 5 times more disagreement over rearing practices than did low-income black parents. In this regard, Langner found that there were equal proportions of fathers and mothers acting as boss among Negro families, while twice as many fathers were the boss among low whites, 4 times as many among high whites, and 7 to 8 times as many among the Spanish. This equality of authority between black parents who are experiencing the negative effects of black schizoid existence, one of those effects being a lack of fixed values which we are agreed upon by both parents and supported by the black community at large, is deleterious for the children. In such a family situation, areas of authority are confused and demands made on the children are contradictory and conflicting. Such a situation is a well-established condition for the development of psychopathological behavior in the children. It was also found by Langner that high-income black parents are more apt to get their children to do things by threatening than low-income black parents, and a higher proportion of high-income mothers and black mothers in general, about 5 times more likely to punish by depriving the children of things or privileges than white Spanish mothers. That generally a few high and low-income black parents were likely to use hugs or kisses when the children were unhappy. He also found that the higher proportion of high-income black children lacked pride in their fathers and mothers than did low-income black children. Mm. That of the 3 ethnic groups studied, the largest percentage of children expressing hostility for their mothers was among the high-income black children. Yeah, I've seen that. In terms of the mother's character and structure, Langner combined several questions centering around the mother's handling of the child of her own psychophysiological complaints, while problems in handling their children and their own problems took the expected direction among high and low income white mothers, i.e., the low income mothers having the greater proportion of problems in both categories. The Negro ranks were reversed so that high income Negro mothers had more problems on the average than low income Negro mothers. Langner goes on to conclude that this finding alone makes us feel that a real elevation and impairment exists in the high income children, and that it may be partially accounted for by the emotional impairment and coping difficulties of their mothers. Body complaints, lack of understanding of the child, changeableness, dissatisfaction in general, and lack of enjoyment of a child, a poor self image all contribute to a picture of a poor mother in this high income Negro group. Behind this, we hypothesize is the second class citizenship, the ghetto, and its more devastating effects on the people who try to rise above it. Perhaps we are seeing in some small measure the price paid for upward mobility across what has been called caste rather than class lines. In summary, there can be no doubt that our preliminary data show that low socioeconomic status and minority ethnic background are associated with great impairment in urban children. Information also suggests that an increase in family income at the expense of having both parents work full time without improvement of parental education or without social acceptance of the family and the wider community is not enough to diminish the rate of impairment among Negro and possibly Puerto Rican children. Langner's study, being rather limited in geographical scope and possibly subject to a number of differing interpretations and criticisms, makes one hesitate to generalize its implications. However, its disturbing preliminary findings without a doubt point to a crucial need for more broader studies of this type. As was indicated by Frazier, the black middle class, which now includes almost half of black families in America, is caught on the horns of a serious dilemma. In its efforts to succeed according to white standards, again, in its efforts to succeed according to white standards, it has become increasingly alienated from its black roots, and yet its rejection and non-acceptance by the white middle class, whose acceptance it perceives as a necessary factor needed for authenticating its own existence, leaves it in a state of psychological limbo. This perception is also shared by the rest of the black classes, even though generally experienced less acutely and striven against less consciously than in the case of the black middle class. Therefore, the rest of black classes still suffer a consequence of this perception accordingly. In this limbo, the alienated black suffers from a double ambivalence, a love-hate relationship with members of his own race, including his own children, and the members of the white rejecting race. Because of this limbo, the black family disorganizes and becomes a tangle of pathology. The eminent student of the American family, psychologist Urie Bronfenbrenner, noted that over the past 3 decades, literally thousands of investigations have been conducted to identify the developmental antecedents of behavior disorders and social pathology. The results point to an almost omnipresent overriding factor: family disorganization. Much of the same research also shows that the forces of disorganization arise primarily not from the circumstances in which the family finds itself, but from the way of life that is imposed on it by those circumstances. He goes on to indicate that those circumstances can be such that they undermine relationships of trust and emotional security between family members, make it difficult for parents to care for, educate, and enjoy their own children. When there is no support for one's role as a parent, and when the time spent with one's family means frustration of career, personal fulfillment, and peace of mind, then the development of the child is adversely affected. In this white dominated society, the higher status of the black man or woman, the more insecure they may become. The fact that that white man can make them leads to a conclusion that he can also break them. The striving to overcome their feelings of insecurity engendered by the nature of white dominated society, the capricious nature of white power, and the desire to be fully accepted by whites. A great number of blacks, regardless of class, seek to overcome these feelings of insecurity by striving even more using white standards as their measurements of progress. The quest on the part of these blacks bring on self-alienation, alienation from the ethnic group and the family. Though the black parents among these strivings blacks may provide their children with all the material things they themselves never had when they were children, and material things comparative to what white children receive from their parents. And they fail to give their children the emotional things that they need to develop wholesome, pro-social personalities. The chronically frustrated nature of black life continues with inextricably bound up with schizoid nature of the black existence is the chronically frustrated nature of black existence. The latter condition is to a large extent a direct function of the former, since blacks evaluate their worthiness and their self-regard, positively or negatively speaking, by use of measuring stick of white standards and by the acceptance or rejection of by whites. They value very much and or seek after those material, social, psychological, economical, educational, political things that which emulated white culture possesses and which that same culture has decreed must be possessed in order to be considered a first class citizen, to be fully accepted along with the sense of equality. See, again, supreme odds of profit, no neutrality, man. It just destroys all that. Consequently, blacks are push pull toward the goals that the whites have achieved or are striving to achieve. Blacks have been told in so many ways that their acceptance by whites as equals demand that they achieve these goals and live according to whites' lifestyle, that these goals and goal strivings make possible. However, the black possibility of attaining these goals or possibility of attaining the necessary preparatory equipment for striving after these goals with a fair chance of achieving them are constantly blocked by inordinate and insurmountable white racist barriers and obstacles. As a result, blacks in America suffer chronic frustration, and black life is generally characterized by the symptoms of frustration. Frustration refers to the unpleasant feelings and or state of mind resulting from lack of satisfaction with desire, the fulfillment of a wish, and or from being or having been delayed, misled from, or blocked from reaching a certain goal and not possessing the power of being able to satisfactorily compensate for the subsequent lack or satisfaction or lack of fulfillment. The symptoms of black frustration are extremely debilitating to the black personality and the black community in general. Although frustration in both its conscious and non-conscious forms operate at all levels of the Black community, its effects are more readily observable and manifest their most vicious effects in the Black lower classes. The Black middle class, which by no means has escaped the pernicious effects of frustration, has been relatively more successful at reducing its effects in a superficially social acceptable way through its material, social, educational, economical, and political gains. Among many symptoms of frustration, we shall at this time discuss the following. Others are discussed in chapter 9. Feeling of powerlessness, inability to delay gratification, apathy, fatalism, denial of worthiness of social goals, low achievement motivation, ego restrictiveness, high interest in diverse activities, and unrealistic striving. The following table schematically illustrate the relationship between the symptoms of parental frustration, their concomitant parental attitudes, and child rearing practices. So we have a chart. Parental frustration symptoms, parental attitudes, and child rearing practices. So, one of the parental frustration symptoms, as you all saw, powerlessness. And whoever comes across this in the future, it look like we have no one in the chat right now. But if you come across this in the future, give us a thumbs up, subscribe, and I appreciate it. Lack of interest in maintaining control over child, feels powerless to effectively control child's destiny, to control child itself, does not inculcate in the child's sense of control over its own destiny and circumstances, encourages dependency in the child, teaches he learned helplessness, does not take deep, sustained interest in developing the child's interest in developing the child's inherent cognitive, social, physical potential, teaches the child to over exaggerate the power of obstacles in its way. Learned helplessness. That's very critical to make sure which basically makes your child appreciate the ideology of victimization. Inability to delay gratification. Tends to react with hostility toward children. It is perceived as a hindrance to parental pleasure. Child is treated as a general nuisance, and consequently rejected and neglected. Child is treated as a doll and an extension of the parental ego, not as an individual. Fails to train child to control emotions and appetites, to concern itself about the future and about the future consequences of current behavior. Overindulgence of the child. So this is the finishing the parts of the chart. Apathy fails to take deep interest in child's development, neglect of child's mental, physical, emotional well-being, fails to motivate child, to teach the child how to overcome and solve problems, to inculcate a sense of duty in the child, to teach the child to take continued interest in its self-improvement, teaches it to be satisfied with far less than it is realistically capable of doing, teaches to accept low status uncomplainingly. Denial of worthiness of social goals, not interested in being a socially acceptable model for a child to imitate, shows disdain for social institutions, for the child's social striving, teaches the child that social mobility is not worth fighting for. Fatalism, believe that child's growth development is a matter of luck, believes that the deliberate efforts in child rearing are futile, teaches child that achievement is a matter of luck, encourages fantasy and magical thinking as solutions to problems, not realistic imagining and thinking, teaches the child to accept laconically what happens to it. Low achievement motivation, not highly motivated to achieve optimal circumstance for self-development and the child's development, does not motivate the child to achieve, to be cognitively independent, personally and socially independent, does not teach child techniques for achieving, does not supply child with games, toys, books, etc., The tools relate the basis for high achievement motivation does not encourage self-confidence, self-love, self-knowledge in the child, does not adequately repulse inferiority complex in the child. Ego restrictiveness, parental self is the main source of interest. The child is secondary. The home is not children-centered. Takes little interest in the child as an individual. Encourages the child's interest and concern for others. Discourages the child's identity with his racial group and society in general. High interest in diverse activities. Interested mainly in pastime activities, not problem-solving activities, which leads to child neglect. Only interested in playing with or distracting the child as a means of dealing with his problems. Teaches the child to engage in diverse behavior when faced with problems or to perceive such behavior as a solution to all problems. Fails to train child to inhibit irrelevant impulses, how to complete a task once begun. Unrealistic striving. Parental unrealistic striving alienates self and child, leaves inadequate time for proper child rearing, teaches child to pursue goals beyond its inherent acquired and attainable talents, powers and means, imposing on the child the parent status strivings without regard to the child's own wishes. Man, this is psychology is something else. Jeez. The restricted nature of the black world. The black world in America is a restricted one, both psychologically and otherwise, as well known and has been and still is much discussed. Therefore, it would not be necessary for us to further elaborate on this matter here, except to remind ourselves in a very general way of its effects on black child as mediated through black parents. The preceding two sections discuss what are essentially the products of the segregation of black people and their effects on black child rearing practices and in turn on the development of the black child. In this section, we merely want to crystallize what has already been implied. The maturing and matured black individual to be a functional and white-dominated world must learn to play by its game rules. The task of learning these rules must begin during the very earliest years of childhood, and this learning is done under the tutelage of the parents or the substitutes. The task of teaching the child the rules of the white game is made difficult, if not impossible, if the parent has not learned in depth the rules herself, or if the parent, knowing the rules, is prevented from successfully transmitting them to her child. By any number of social, psychological, economic, political factors, the restricted black world obviously breeds these two parental deficiencies. Black parental efforts to rear the child so they can function equally with the white children miss their mark because their child rearing practices are often based on erroneous assumptions abstracted from their observations of superficial white behavior. They have little or no knowledge of the social, psychological, cultural infrastructure behind the white behavior facade. Thus, restricted black parent may want her child What's going on, man? Close the door. All right, where were we? Black parental efforts to rear their child so they can function equally with white children miss their mark because their child rearing practices are often based on erroneous assumptions extracted from their observations of superficial white behavior. They have little or no knowledge of the social, psychological, cultural infrastructure behind the white behavior facade. Thus, the restricted Black parent may want their child to attain such socially valued goals as academic success, become a successful professional, such as doctor, a lawyer, brilliant scientist, etc., but a lack of knowledge of what kind of early childhood training laid the best basis um, for such achievements may doom her desires to disappointment. And some Black parental aspirations for the children are as high as their white counterparts, but the restrictiveness of the world cuts them off from the necessary psychosocial resources needed to lay a firm foundation for the success of their children. I'm gonna take a little break here. So I want to read this book. All right. You want to read it? Count with Blue. Hey, I'm so glad you're here. Blue and I are having a picnic. Will you join us?
Yeah.
Great. We've got one big table for all of our friends. Let's count what else we have for our picnic. How many bags of groceries do we have to take outside?
Okay.
Let's count.
1, 2, 3.
No, let's count.
1, 2, 3.
No, you can count the bags of groceries. All right, we'll read this when I get done, all right? I'm almost done. So I'll finish the live, then we'll finish reading that. All right? You hear me? All right. One of the major foundational ingredients for succeeding in the white-dominated world is the mastery of language, vocabulary of that world. This means a firm mastery in all of its variously related aspects, whether graphical, reading, writing, lexical, vocabulary, semantic, meaning, syntactical, grammar, expressive, speaking, qualities of the language. This mystery, which is firmer the earlier it begins in life, the first 2 years, is the keystone in the cognitive, social, psychological superstructure of the individual. Generally, it can be safely intimated that the Black parent has too little awareness of the immense importance of language and gave the importance of linguistic facility for the Black child's success in white terms. It is principally deficiencies in linguistic functioning that are responsible for much Black cognitive and academic failure. Other things held constant. We mentioned early in this chapter that the Black child's mental development begins to fall behind that of the white child's at the point where language begins to influence significantly the personality structure. We are mindful that other important factors also contribute to this lag of the Black child. In fact, our 2 previous sections dealt with some of those factors, but it's because language is the main vehicle for transmission of these other factors that we are emphasizing here. As a child develops language, this principal means by which he structures his relation to the world and to himself. And it's the principal means by which he influences the world, is influenced by the world, and influences himself. The brain is his controlling computer of the body and mind and language, and the words are the cards which program the computer brain. Analysis and generalization are the key elements in intellectual functioning. These processes are guided by the logical structure of speech. The same can, to a large extent, be said about a behavior in general, of which intellectual function is but a part. The basis of speech and ideas is word meaning, which begins to develop the first years of childhood. The psychological structure of thinking as a whole is word meaning. Luria underlines the importance of the word in early childhood when he writes. Language, which incorporates the experience of generations, or more broadly speaking, of mankind, is included in the process of the child's development from the first months of his life. This whole process of the transmission of knowledge and the formation of concepts, which is the basic way the adult influences the child, constitutes the central process of the child's intellectual development. The acquisition of a language system involves reorganization of the child's basic mental processes. The word thus becomes a tremendous factor which forms mental activity, perfecting the reflection of reality and creating new forms of attention, of memory, and imagination of thought and action. We are terminating our discussion of language at this point because subject will be more extensively discussed in chapter 9, however, since at about the age of 2, the curves of development in thought and speech till then separate, meet and join to initiate a new form of behavior. We felt it important to briefly discuss at this point. All right. Wow. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more pages. Let's go and knock this out. We'll be through chapter 2. The restricted black world and attitudes in it generates effectively cuts the black parent off from the knowledge of the white linguistic structure and thus vitiates her attempts to transmit the necessary linguistic knowledge to her child and blinds her to the vast importance of language and development of her child's full potential, cognitive and otherwise. This same word also prevents her from obtaining a substantial causal content, knowledge of mental, physical, social, economical, educational, behavioral patterns that are necessary for achievement and non-psychopathological adjustment in a white dominated world. Note, the reader should not assume that the author thinks integration into the white world is the only or most desirable means by which a healthy psychosocial adjustment can be made by the black individual, the black community. This is most definitely not the case. In fact, the reader would be nearer the truth if he assumed the opposite. Exactly. I believe that's one of the issues there. The whole action of integration. Like if you're gonna, if we were supposed to integrate, we would have known absolutely what the system was about that we were integrating into. In our effort to answer the question of what is the nature of psychosocial world of black parents, which includes, of course, their children, which causes them to socialize their children to behave maladaptively in both black and white society, we have briefly discussed 3 possibly responsible variables: the schizoid, a frustrating and restricted nature of black existence. We have seen that these variables, operating in dynamically changing combinations and permutations in the black parent, causes the parent to program her child to emit cognitively, personally, and socially inappropriate and dysfunctional behavior. One of the main characteristics of each of the variables have in common is inability to properly socialize the child due to the absence of a clearly established, consistent, and rational, socio-culturally founded, and supported system of attitudes, goals, and values. Such a system, if it existed, could serve as a means by which the parent could conduct her behavior, that of her child, so as to reduce significantly the probability of permanently creating serious malfunctions in the child's cognitive behavioral functioning. The vacillatory, dissonant child rearing practices brought on by black schizoid existence, the reactionary child rearing practices engendered by frustrated black existence and the ignorance of the rules of the game, resulting from the restricted nature of black life, coalesce to produce fertile conditions for the aberrational growth of asocial, antisocial, cognitive deficient, self-denigrating, or at best minimal normal functioning tendency in the black child and adult. Black parental attitudes and the child's physical characteristics. Obviously, the attitudes of the parent towards the child's physical characteristics is of greater importance in the parent-child relations than the child's own psychological well-being. Leaving aside body structural characteristics in America, skin color does much to structure the relations between persons, including parent and child. A person is often rejected or accepted based on skin color. The crucial nature of skin-based relations becomes quite apparent when we realize that the skin is the primary sense and punitive organ of the human infant. To achieve adequate physical and psychological growth, the child must receive the appropriate amount of physical, affectionate cuteness stimulation. Affectionate skin stimulation is the principal means by which the mother communicates her love to her child. Physically speaking, the early growth and development of the infant's nervous system is to a large extent dependent on the nature of the cuteness stimulation and its received. Psychologically speaking, proper cutaneous stimulation gives the infant concrete feelings of security and reassurance in the face of strange new complexities. Let's see, cutaneous.
Hey, my muscle.
So cutaneous, anything relating to existing organ affecting the skin. All right. Psychologically speaking, Proper cutaneous stimulation gives the infant concrete feelings of security and reassurance in the face of strange new complexities. Too little or too much cutaneous stimulation, degrading comments about the child's skin color may generate conflicts in the child, feelings of rejection, self-hatred, and inferiority complex in the child. Thus, the infant's skin, as well as that of the adult, is a very crucial part of his personality. To insult the child's skin is to insult the child itself. Warm cutaneous contact between parent and child develops parental child emotional attachment, develops trust, self-confidence, self-love, self-respect in the child. Lloyd Warner et al. Confirmed that 3 hypotheses about blacks and their attitudes toward skin color in their book, Coloring Human Nature. The systematic subordination of Negroes to white people in the American social system has a definite effect upon the development of Negro personality. Evaluations of color and other physical traits made by Negroes themselves and their group influence the development of personality. Social class, position, occupation, and status in Negro society have effects upon the Negro personality formation. Warner's first hypothesis is essentially what this book is about. The second is our present concern. And third, which is basically beyond the scope of this book, briefly related to our discussion in Chapter 8. Not surprisingly, Warner found that among blacks, personal appearance is a constantly recurring theme. He also found that most blacks evaluate physical appearance in terms of caste contrast, or essentially according to white standards. During his interview, which we were made in Chicago in the early 1960s, Warner confirmed that already well-known fact that there existed many expressions, almost of proverbial nature, that place a low value on dark skin color and a high value on light skin color. Color then served a caste determinant in the black community as it did in the white community. Warner quotes anthropologist Melville Herskovitz as asking, "Is it strange then that he, the Negro, should unconsciously glorify that which is like the traits of the group, enjoying every opportunity that is denied him?" Color evaluations reflect values, standards, and attitudes of the dominant white society, influence black self-awareness, self-concept, self-love, and black and Persian relations in a variety of ways. The most detrimental, it is pronouncedly Negroid black that is most rejected, and the more Caucasoid black that is most accepted in the black community. This color-based acceptance rejection continuum may reveal itself operationally at birth of the black child. Harrison Ross, in their book, The Black Child, The Parent's Guide, points out that the black parents look at the newborn differently than do their white counterparts. Black parents check the baby's color before assessing anything else about the infant's body. Other body parts are checked after the color is determined.
Hi, get here.
All right.
What is?
Yeah. All right. I'm almost done. I got one more page. All right. Or 2 more pages. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 4 more. Black parents check the baby's color before it says anything else about the infant's body. Other body parts are checked after the color is determined. This is unlike that of white parents who concern themselves firstly with the child's physical normality and health. According to Harrison Ross, whites rarely ever mention skin color. She goes on a crucially important statement. This overwhelming concern with color is part of the special black dimension of child rearing. Color of the child can affect the quality of parental love and the child's position in the family. In my practice, I've often had to help mothers change their attitude toward their children because they were favoring the lighter skinned youngsters at the expense of the darker ones. The black mother or father who consciously or unconsciously align themselves with the American color caste value system are prone to reject or treat the children differently according to that system. This creates an unhealthy psychological atmosphere for the children involved. Under these conditions, the child is looked on in terms of his or her superficial qualities and also related in those terms. This practice of putting child's basic humanness last destroys the possibility of the child's fulfilling its inherent potential. The black mother may signal her rejection of her dark baby in several ways: by being overly annoyed by baby's crying, eating problems, temperament, and its unresponsive to her calming, soothing efforts, which are generally caused by her own problems; by handling the child roughly, carelessly, or neglectfully when attending it; by refusing to talk, sing, or play with it; and by not responding to its apparent loneliness or sadness. The dark child
brought up under such a regime will learn that it's unloved, unworthy, unwanted because it is dark, and will early begin to suffer from lack of self-confidence, self-love, and self-respect. Will develop into a person who will have difficult time trusting or loving others, particularly those of his own ethnic group, because he first felt rejected by his parents who are members of this group. Some of our readers may think that the current Black is Beautiful, I'm Black and Proud movement has removed much of the relevance of what we have just finished discussing. We do not think so. While the new Black consciousness has helped and is helping to reduce the problems discussed above, the job by no means complete. In fact, there is a danger of reverse discrimination against the light-skinned Black child. However, we don't think this danger will materialize significantly due to historical color discrimination by Blacks or because of their dependent relationship with whites. Will not change the system with white support. The fact that such jingles as the ones we have quoted in the paragraph exist indicates that struggle with the evaluated nature of skin color in the Black community is a critical stage of development and is still unresolved. Black is Beautiful was more of a statement used to convince the uncertain minds of the vast majority of Blacks rather than a statement of conviction. Though it may be socially expected and constant demand of one another by Blacks to make such positive sounding statements in public, is very doubtful whether ideas conveyed by such statements are actually personally and unconsciously believed by Blacks. The belief in the truth of such statements is too tenuous in Black minds to result in a confident, healthy attitude toward their children at this point in time. We must remember that today's Black parents and grandparents were brought up under regimes where Black was not beautiful and are still suffering from the psychological scars produced by their own upbringing. Under optimistic conditions in this area, it will still take a number of generations for the Black child to escape the curse of the mark of oppression. Implications and recommendations. If the Black child realizes his full potential, then its care and training should be pursued with as much accurate knowledge as possible about his unique developmental qualities and vulnerabilities. We have seen that the Black child and his psychomotor developmental rates is not just a white child painted Black. Of course, it's plain to all that the Black child's psychosocial developmental career significantly differs from that of his white counterpart. Even though there are fundamental differences between the Black and white child development, little or no complete programs have been promulgated to deal with the uniqueness of the Black child development and its attendant problems. In books on child development, the Black child is treated as an afterthought, used as a symbol of deprivation, treated as a footnote, or just plainly ignored. It is necessary that the caring and training of one Black child, if it is to be maximally beneficial to the child himself, to the Black community, and to the society in general, must be based on other than unexamined extrapolation from developmental care and training procedures based on studies of white children developed mainly from or for the rearing of white children. Certainly, there are many areas of overlap between child rearing procedures used for the white child and procedures used for the Black child, but the racial historical background differences, the differences in the conditions under which they are reared, and the essential differences in the futures they will face and problems they will have to endure are wide in the demand that the Black child training should be pursued along conscious, studied, informed, well-thought lines and not the haphazard, faddish, reactionary, contradictory, dysfunctional lines that characterize such training today. Put it back. Noble. Leave it alone.
Hey, it was a heavy book.
Yeah, it's heavy, yeah. It's a binder. Then, in light of the fact that the Black child's average psychomotor development differs significantly from that of the white child's during the first 2 years of life, the nutritional and other social physical programs can be developed that will answer to the unique needs of our Black children. It's called the developmental psychology of the Black child. That we educate our Black parents to the fact that the Black child is not naturally inferior to any other child, and what lag there may exist between the Black child and the white child due to adverse psychosocial and political economical circumstances which prevail in the Black community, and they can do much to allay the pernicious effects of such circumstances. That the Black parent, through reading, conversation, observation, imagination, etc., learns in depth the rules of the white-defined game in which her child will one day play and lay the foundation for the learning of those rules early in the child's life.
This means training the child for flexibility, not for being white. The child can be taught to deal cognitively and socially with whites without losing respect and love for himself and his racial group. Since the black child's birth is destined to be bicultural, he must be taught from his early years how to function efficiently in both of the cultures he will have to deal with. This means he has to be taught to equally respect and handle efficiently his own black English as well as standard English. Let the black parent be educated to guard against the negative child rearing practices generated by schizoid, frustrated, restricted black existence. That clear, rational, consistent, understandable to the parent and child, community supported values and limits to establish and use by black parents to guide their child rearing practices. For the black parent who wishes to raise competent, independent, assertive, exploratory, self-determining, happy children who are also pro-social, we make the following recommendations. Guide your child's activities along rational lines. Help the child to see that what is demanded of him should be done because it is right or the reasonable thing to do, not because he may be punished or will lose your love. Do not be afraid to exert control when necessary. The exertion of control will not be psychologically damaging to the child. The reasons behind such exertion are explained to him. The child is allowed to have some input concerning parental policies. Show your child that you expect him to have a will of his own, but at the same time, he's expected to conform to reasonable parental and social standards. Have confidence in your ability to parent. However, do not let that confidence be such that you disrespect your child's interests, opinions, and individuality. Be a loving, consistent, demanding, and respectful parent of your child's independent decision making, but at the same time, be steadfast concerning your own standards. Do not fear the use of limited punishment if necessary. Expect your child to perform as well as you can. Building your child a sense of duty by assigning him family chores which he is required to complete. Teach him to fulfill reasonable commitments once he makes them. Have fun with your child, and at times let them be a part of the family decision-making process. The combination of control with encouragement, which we have tried to embody in the above recommendations, will create in your child a feeling of security, of being loved, and knowing what is expected of them. The child will also experience the satisfaction of completing tasks, meeting responsibilities, and successfully achieving goals. These things can be accomplished if you set reasonable goals and realistic standards for yours and your child's behavior. All right, one moment, son. All right, so that's the end of chapter 2. Chapter 3 would be the black child, the preschool years, the effects of race awareness. All right, so we got through that. Yeah, it's a solid book so far. Man, just makes you see. And of course, we already know that it's an enormous amount of responsibility having children, but just reading it broken down like that, and then you see kind of how you came up and others around you. It's like, man, it's extremely critical. All right, so until next time, Islam.